Okay. All right. So our plan today, first, we would like to understand what a brand means, because I think there's to a lot of different people, it means a lot of different things. And I think it would be useful for us to first have a common understanding of what a brand is, and also understand what your brand is telling people as it stands today, and whether that's aligning with what you'd like it to say. Because a lot of times those things can be very different. So you might have this idea in your head about what your brand should be saying, and other people might be perceiving it differently. So how do you get those two aligned? So what does branding mean to you? A brand, if you ask people, a lot of people would first say it's the logo. They talk about colors associated with the brand. They talk about a tagline. They can talk about any number of things. And sometimes it's as simple, like people refer to specific products when they're actually only talking about a brand. So what a brand is much larger than that. And it's a mosaic of things. It's actually, if you think about it like this, let's say if I said something, there's probably, let's say, 50 people on this call right now. And all of those people understand what I'm saying slightly differently based on their lived experiences. Now, but the common theme is, ideally, if my concept gets across to you, all of those will converge on a singular thing, right? So it's the same thing. A brand is basically what people think, feel, and say about your business. So it's not a central thing, but it's a bunch of different things. It's all people looking at your brand from different angles, looking at your products and everything else, and how they perceive it. So all of that together is your brand. Now, brand is made up of several components. We'll look at that on the next slide. So it's everything the customer sees, touches, feels, experiences. So if you think about it, right at the heart of it is what we call the brand purpose or positioning. And then this is bolstered by things like the logo, the color, the images that you use. So for example, if the kind of advertising that you put out, all of those things will have certain images, and those images may align more closely with your brand. And similarly, even the type of font that you use, your brand voice. So is it sort of a serious brand? Is it a fun brand? Is it a sort of a challenger brand? So all of those things come across in the kind of voice that you use, and also even shapes. So is it something very angular? For example, I always use the example of cars. You expect certain cars to look a certain way. They wouldn't look like, for example, if you look at a Beetle, it's very curvy. If you look at a Volvo, it's very boxy. So these are the kind of things that it's just associated with the brand. Then you apply the brand to your website, to videos that you put out, the emails that you send, your advertising, your mobile application, your blogs, your packaging. All of these are ways in which your brand reaches the customer. And that all of this together forms the perception of your brand. That's all of these things are part of brand as a whole, right? So I always like to look at some numbers. Now, if we look at the numbers, 81% of consumers need to trust a brand before they consider buying. Now, that's really important. Trust is a key word. Like, a lot of people think of, when they think of a brand, they either have a positive experience or a negative experience with it. So 81% of customers want to be able to trust the brand that they're buying into. Then you have 77% of customers prefer to shop with a brand that they follow on social media. So they understand the brand, they're really engaged, they know what the brand is up to at all times, and that's when they feel comfortable purchasing. 65% of consumers say the brand's CEO and employees influence their decisions to buy. Now, the reason why I put this in here is that I noticed when I was going through the attendees for this masterclass, there were a handful of people who are actually are the face of the business. So I think that's really important. And also your story will come into the brand. And I will touch on that in a later slide. But basically what you need to understand is that 65% of people, it's like your brand and your individual personality are kind of tied together. So that's really important that the brand's CEO's image, the personal brand, also is developed alongside the business brand so that they can kind of, it's a symbiotic relationship. But I think the key thing that you have to remember is 55% of brands' first impressions are visual. So, and there's a reason for this. So visuals can never be lost in translation. So if you look at this picture, um, you know, I mean, I don't know how clear it is or how big it is on your screen, but if you look at the sign right here, that's pretty clear what that is. Now, in all of the other signs that you see, I mean, that one stands right out and it's very easy to recognize. And that's how branding is. So if you can, your visual output. So a lot of people associate the logo with the brand for the same reason. Visuals make a very important key impression on your consumers. So how do we build a brand? So building a brand, what it takes is a strong brand positioning, and then you have to build a brand narrative around it. So brand positioning, what is brand positioning? So brand positioning is the unique value that your brand brings to the customer. And then afterwards, the brand narrative is a very concise and streamlined story that acts as the core to your marketing and communication. So if you think about it like this, your USP is what you do better than your competition and what value you bring to the consumer. But the way that you sell that story, the kind of elevator pitch, if you will, a 30-second or a 10-second, one phrase, one line that kind of encompasses everything that you do, the key thing that you're trying to get across to the consumer. If we can get that, that's a brand narrative. So let's try to understand how do we arrive at brand positioning. So the key thing to understand is who is your target audience. Now, in a lot of cases, when people start out and they develop a product, what they're thinking of is that they believe that everybody needs their product. Now, that may be true, but marketing to everyone is very, very difficult. It's near impossible, and it's very cost ineffective. So the smart thing to do is to try and target individuals who are extremely likely to buy your product. So the people that need it the most, if you can think of it that way. So if you look at the target audience, what you need to understand is you need to really, really be very specific about a group of individuals that would be interested in buying a product. The next thing that you need to do is understand what do they need. Is your product addressing their needs? Now, your product may address a subset of their needs. It may meet all of their needs. But the other thing that we need to understand is how those needs are met. Like, is it through the way that we deliver that experience to them starts to matter. And how do we make them feel while doing it? Now, that's really important to consider. Like I said, a brand is everything to do with how they think, how they feel. All of those together makes the brand. And the final thing that you need to bear in mind is what the customer would say about you. Now, if they have a positive experience, they're probably going to say great things. If they had a negative experience, they're probably going to dissuade other consumers from buying from you. So it's really important. So there's a metric that's called the Net Promoter Score, and what it does is it tracks the number of people that would try to discourage people from buying a brand, and then you have a bunch of people in the middle who are indifferent, who don't wouldn't recommend you, wouldn't go out of their way to recommend you, but at the same time wouldn't, sort of discourage people from buying from you. And then right at the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are your advocates. They will go out, they're like your ambassadors. They will go out and try and sell your product or sell your brand because they believe in what you're doing, and they believe that what you do aligns really well with what those potential consumers' needs are. So let me go a little bit deeper into understanding your target audience. So this is an example that we've you looked at before, right? Lululemon is a brand of activewear that started off in Canada. It's now one of the most valuable brands. And what they do is the original product was targeted at busy, active, professional women who want high quality, who want it to be fashionable, and who want it to be comfortable. So all of those boxes, it needed to tick all of those boxes, and they were very specific about marketing to that subset of customers. And then on out of that, we can say that other people who would buy Lululemon would be other people that work out. Now, then you have an outer layer of people who just like comfy clothing, and they would buy Lululemon as well. But the key thing that you have to remember is your marketing should be targeting the guys right in the middle. But if the other people buy, that's a bonus. That's the way that, and the marketing might reach them somehow. But the key thing to remember is that if you focus your marketing efforts on your core market, then automatically you're going to get those people advocating for your product and kind of that creating this outer rings where other people will then find out and be interested in your products or services. So one of the key things that you need to develop in order to understand your customers is something called customer personas. Now, this I find a lot of people don't invest their time doing, and I think this is quite important when you're trying to build a brand. And the reason why I say that is because if you don't actually think about a very specific person that is going to use your product, it's going to be very difficult for you to understand how to effectively market to them, what kind of messaging that they're going to receive, where they're going to receive the messaging, how they're going to react. So all of these factors combined, it's really, really important to understand every aspect of the person that you're trying to sell to. So you have to actually picture them as a real customer, give them a name, build out their entire personality, interests, activities, things that they like, they don't like, the kind of things that they are afraid of, the things that they worry about, their motivations. All of these things factor into a customer persona. So if you put yourself in the customer's shoes, if someone was trying to market something at you, all of those aspects come into play when you're trying to make that decision. So it's really, really important that you try and create those customer personas for your business or your brand. Now, the other thing that a lot of people miss is being clear on the problem that you're looking to solve. It's really, really important that without addressing a problem, you don't really have a very firm business case. So whatever it is, you need to be very, very clear on the problem that you're trying to solve. And that will also give you your USP or unique selling point. Now, how do we solve the problem? Now, if you look at the little Venn diagram in the middle, you'll see this area right here. This is your strength. So the customer's needs, there are other people offering, there are competitors in the market offering something, but the area in the middle is you're competing head to head. You have everything that they have. You're in the same boat. So you're not presenting any advantages to people. But right here, this is something where there's a customer need, but the competitors aren't meeting that specific customer need. So this is exactly where you sit. So you need to understand how you uniquely address those customer needs and the kind of differentiators that you have and what benefits that your products can bring to the table compared to others. So one of the ways that you can easily find this out is by speaking to your existing customers or to your friends and family who understand what it is that you're trying to do. Because sometimes when you're very, very close to the subject, it's very difficult for you to think outside of that, right? Now, if you look at brand identity, we're looking at several aspects of a brand. So you've got design, you've got communication, you've got logos, you've got behavior, the way that the brand behaves and is perceived. Then you have the type of language that you use, your mission and your vision, your culture. All of these are part of your brand identity. But the key thing that you have to remember is, now this again goes back to that story about bringing in the CEO into the story and building the personal brand and why that's important. So if you look at this, you've got a character. So let's say yourself, if you're the CEO or whoever's running the business, then you have a problem, and then you have a way to resolve it. Now, all of this combined tells the brand story. So you have to take the customer on this journey where you, as an individual, you kind of frame the problem that you're trying to solve, and then the solution that you're bringing to the table. So all of this together becomes your brand story, right? Or brand narrative, which I mentioned, which is a sort of language that I mentioned earlier. Now, so if you look at certain brands, successful brands can be doing the exact same thing, right? But they are perceived differently, or they address different segments of the market. So it's really important that you could be doing the same thing as someone else, but if you target a slightly different segment or you present yourself as something different, there is still an opportunity for you to build a brand around it. Now, let me give you this example. So how do you want your brand to make people feel? So if you look at British Airways, all their marketing messages, everything, they have a way that they present themselves, right? They present themselves as a quintessentially British brand. Then on the other side, you have a challenger brand like Virgin. Now, I mean, the last line there talks about flying in the face of the ordinary. So basically, they're trying to provide an experience that's very different. It's non-traditional. It doesn't conform to the sort of expectations. Like whereas BA is a little bit more by the textbook. That's the kind of impression that they're trying to create. Another way that if you want to understand branding better is to see what products would look like if they moved into a different industry or a different segment. Now, the example that I've chosen here is, let's say, Apple and Microsoft build cars. These are some images that I got off the internet. Basically, if Apple made a car, I mean, I'm not saying that this is exactly what they would look like, but this is kind of how they're perceived. So if someone were to design something for Apple, this is what it would look like. For Microsoft, it would look like the car on the right. So what I'm trying to say is that when you move from one industry to another, and when people can imagine what your product would look like, that is when you have a strong brand. That's when people have understood or have a certain understanding of what your brand is trying to say. Now, there's other examples like this. So, this is a brand called Supreme, and every time you think of it, you kind of understand they have the most random products. They just stamp their thing on it, but usually it's the same sort of their logo on something very similar, and then it's the color scheme. It's the red. It's very like a recurring theme in their branding. So, but it's very, very, it stands out. Everybody recognizes it right away, right?